In the summer of 1972, three sisters vanished after the Stillwater County Fair. No witnesses, no bodies. Only this Polaroid, found on the bridge the next morning, showing their reflections smiling up from the water, hours after they were declared missing. For 50 years, no one could explain the light beneath Stillwater Bridge, until one filmmaker returned to ask the one question everyone in town was afraid to answer. Subscribe, and don't look too long into the water. The river shimmered under the July sun, a ribbon of heat and light winding through Stillwater, Missouri. On the far bank, the fairgrounds were still. Abandoned tents flapping in the breeze, a lost balloon snagged in a cottonwood tree. Somewhere upstream a train passed, its whistle stretching thin across the air. The photograph was taken a little after 6 in the evening, 1972. Three sisters stood beneath Stillwater Bridge. June Carroll and Lucy Lathrop, barefoot in the shallows, dresses bright against the water. Someone had asked them to smile. They did. The flash captured their reflections, shimmering beneath the surface like figures trapped under glass. By 10 o'clock that night, they were gone. The Polaroid was found the next morning at the bridge railing, tucked under a damp carnival ticket. Their parents filed a missing persons report before dawn. Search teams combed the river for days, dragging the current with steel hooks. They found a shoe, a ribbon, a camera missing its film. No bodies, no answers. For 50 years, the photograph lived behind museum glass, its edges yellowed, its mystery reduced to folklore. Some said the girls had run off with the carnival. Others whispered they'd fallen into the river and been taken by the undertow. But when the original image was digitized half a century later, analysts saw something no one had noticed before. Behind the girls' smiling reflections stood a fourth shape, a tall figure holding what looked like a lantern, light blooming from within the water itself. And that was where Claire Rowan's story began. 50 years after the photograph, Stillwater, Missouri looked exactly like a place that wanted to be forgotten. The town's welcome sign leaned at an angle, paint peeling, population count crossed out in marker. A handful of brick storefronts lined Main Street, their windows reflecting the slow gray roll of the river beyond. Claire Rowan parked beside a faded diner called Betty's and let the car engine tick into silence. She'd driven from Chicago overnight, chasing the story that had haunted her since journalism school, a disappearance older than she was, preserved in one blurred image that had never stopped whispering. The Polaroid sat in her glove compartment, sealed in a clear sleeve. Three sisters, one river, one impossible reflection. She stepped out into heat that smelled of water and iron. Cicadas screamed from the trees. Across the street, a man in overalls swept dust from his porch and watched her with the slow curiosity small towns reserved for outsiders. She gave a polite nod. He didn't return it. Inside Betty's, the air was thick with grease and nostalgia. Old photos of the Stillwater Fair hung crookedly along the wall. Rides, parades, cotton candy, children. Claire ordered coffee and unfolded her map. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled tight, glanced at the recorder on the table. "You're not another ghost hunter, are you?" she asked. "Documentary journalist," Claire said. "Anniversary piece." The woman snorted softly. "Same thing, just more polite words." Claire smiled. "You remember the Lathrop girls? Everyone here remembers. We just try not to." The waitress poured the coffee, eyes distant. "Their mama used to come sit by the bridge every evening until she passed. Said she could see them in the water when the sun went down. See them how? Like light under the current. You'll see what I mean." The bell above the door rang. A tall man in a khaki uniform stepped in, mid-50s, trim, the kind of calm that came from a lifetime of not being surprised. Sheriff Earl Penner. Claire recognized him from her research, the son of the original investigator. He nodded once at the waitress, then at her. "Miss Rowan," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. "You picked a strange week to visit." "Rivers high. I thought the anniversary might make people talk." He stirred sugar into his coffee without looking at her. "People around here don't talk about the bridge. Not to strangers, anyway." "I'm not here to sensationalize," she said. "I'm here because the original Polaroid was rescanned last month. It showed something new, a figure behind the girls that made him look up. His eyes were pale, unreadable." "You've seen it?" She nodded. "It looks like someone holding a lantern." Penner leaned back, chair creaking. "That photo's been tested a dozen ways since I was a kid. People see what they need to. Ghosts, angels, reflections. My father thought it was just bad film, and you." He hesitated. "I think some things stay hidden because they want to." The conversation ended there. He left cash for both coffees and slid a business card toward her. "If you start poking around the bridge, tell me first." River's unpredictable this time of year. When he was gone, the waitress whispered, "His daddy was the last one to dive that river. Came up blind in one eye after. Said he saw a light down there that wasn't the sun." Claire finished her coffee and stepped outside. Afternoon heat pressed close. From where she stood, she could see the top of Stillwater Bridge stretching over the trees. Steel ribs arched against the glare. She drove there slowly, camera on the passenger seat, windows down. The road curved along the riverbank until it opened onto the old crossing. No traffic now, just weathered planks and the whisper of water below. She parked midway across, got out, and leaned against the railing. The river moved lazily, brown-green, carrying flecks of sun. It looked harmless, ordinary, but the weight of 50 years hung over it like humidity. She could almost hear the flash of that camera, the echo of laughter swallowed by current. She took out the Polaroid and held it beside the view. The angle matched perfectly. Trees had grown, guardrails had rusted, but the river's face hadn't changed. And there, just below the surface, something shimmered. A trick of light, maybe, or a memory made visible. For a heartbeat, 3 pale shapes seemed to rise in the reflection of the bridge. Then the clouds shifted, and the water turned opaque again. Claire exhaled slowly, forcing logic back into her lungs. She was tired, dehydrated, full of folklore. Nothing more. Still, as she turned to leave, she felt watched. Not by the town, not by the sheriff, by the water itself, humming faintly with a light she couldn't unsee. The county nursing home sat on a hill above Stillwater, a low brick building ringed by willow trees that drooped like tired sentries. Claire signed the visitor's log with a borrowed pen that left blue ink smudges on her thumb. She'd arranged the interview through Sheriff Penner, though he'd warned her, Ruth Keene doesn't like remembering. The receptionist guided her down a corridor lined with faded paintings of river scenes. The air smelled of disinfectant and lavender. Outside the last door on the right, a nurse murmured, "She gets confused sometimes. Just go slow." Inside, Ruth Keene sat in a sunlit chair, a blanket over her knees. 83, sharp cheekbones, eyes filmed with age but still holding that wary spark. On the table beside her sat a half-empty glass of lemonade and a single photograph in a plastic sleeve. A black and white carnival ride, the Ferris wheel turning over a crowd. Claire introduced herself gently. "I'm filming a documentary about the Stillwater Fair. I know you worked the ticket booth in 1972. Ruth's gaze drifted to the window where the river shimmered faintly in the distance. 50 years, she said. Hard to believe that kind of time fits into one picture. You remember the Lathrop sisters? Pretty girls, Ruth murmured, always laughing. Their mama used to give them red ribbons so she could see them in the crowd. Claire switched on her recorder. You were one of the last to see them. I suppose I was. Ruth smiled faintly. They came by for cotton candy before sunset. June, the oldest, had a camera. She kept trying to catch the light under the bridge. The light. Ruth's fingers twitched on the blanket. That's what she said. It's like there's another fair under the water. She said she saw lanterns moving down there. Her voice lowered. A man was with them. Not family. He had one of those shoulder cameras, real fancy. Said he was capturing the reflection. Called it light beneath water. Claire leaned forward. Did you know him? Never seen him before. But the way the girls listened, like he'd told them a secret. What happened after they left? Ruth's eyes clouded. Nothing I could tell the police that made sense. The bridge glowed that night. Whole river did, like moonlight caught underneath. Then it went dark again. She looked at Claire, voice trembling. Sometimes I still see them when I close my eyes. Standing right under the surface, waiting for the flash. The tape whirred softly. Claire swallowed, throat tight. Do you remember his name? The man with the camera? Ruth frowned, searching her memory. Something biblical. Henry. No. Hank Ellison, maybe. Or was it Harris? Claire's pulse quickened. Henry Ellison, traveling photographer. He disappeared a week later. Ruth nodded slowly. That sounds right. Then softer. They say his camera kept taking pictures after he was gone. Before Claire could press further, Ruth's gaze shifted to something behind her shoulder. The old woman smiled faintly, eyes shining. You brought them with you. Claire turned. Nothing there, just the open doorway and the faint hum of the hall lights. When she looked back, Ruth had gone still, her chest barely moving. A nurse hurried in, checking her pulse, whispering, She does that sometimes, falls asleep mid-conversation. But Claire's recorder was still running, and through the static of its tiny microphone she heard Ruth's fading whisper. Too bright. Too bright. That night, back in her motel room, Claire uploaded the audio. The waveforms looked normal at first, but when she isolated the section with Ruth's last words, a faint pattern emerged beneath. The hum of river water and a second voice overlapping the old woman's. Come back when it's dark. Her scalp prickled. She played it again, slower. The river sound grew louder, swallowing the whisper until only the word dark remained, echoing. Claire shut the laptop, heart hammering. Through the thin curtains she could see the river glinting in moonlight. For a moment it looked as though something below the bridge was glowing. 3 faint halos pulsing under the current. The next morning the front page of the Stillwater Gazette stopped her cold. Local woman found dead at county home. Ruth Keene, 83, passed peacefully in her sleep, according to staff. The timestamp on the article matched the exact minute Claire had left the nursing home. She stared at her reflection in the motel mirror, the Polaroid propped against the lamp. Her own face hovered above the 3 girls, blurred by the glass. The camera on her desk beeped softly, unprompted, as if it had turned itself on. When she picked it up, the screen flickered once and froze on a single frame. The bridge at night, water glowing from below, and a tall figure standing at the railing holding something bright in his hand. The Stillwater Historical Society smelled of paper and river mud. Its museum occupied the town's old post office, a squat limestone building where the air was always a few degrees cooler than outside. Rows of display cases held rusted farm tools, arrowheads, and faded county fair posters. In the far corner, beneath glass, sat the photograph. Claire paused before it, feeling the same pull she'd known since childhood. 3 smiling girls frozen in midsummer light, reflections trembling under the surface like another world peering back. The real Polaroid was smaller than she expected, corners frayed, colors drained to sepia. A caption read, Lathrop Sisters, July 1972. Photographer unknown. The curator appeared from the next room carrying a stack of file folders. You must be Miss Rowan, she said. Sheriff Penner called. I'm Mrs. Dugan. Been keeper of this place 30 years. You're wanting the negatives? There weren't any, Claire said. But I need to scan the print itself at high resolution. Different spectrums, UV and infrared if possible. Mrs. Dugan frowned. You think there's something we missed? Claire smiled politely. Sometimes the film remembers things the eye doesn't. She set up her equipment while the curator watched from a respectful distance. The scanner's gentle hum filled the quiet room. Outside, thunder rolled over the river valley. Rain streaked the windows, blurring Main Street into watercolor. When the scan finished, Claire loaded the digital file onto her laptop. At first glance, nothing new. But when she increased contrast, deepened shadows, a faint shimmer appeared near the lower edge of the frame. An outline the size of a man, elongated by ripples. She zoomed closer. The figure held something cylindrical, glowing slightly even through decades of faded chemistry. Mrs. Dugan leaned in. That's a trick of light, isn't it? Maybe, Claire murmured, though her heart was beating too fast. What direction was the sun that day? The curator thought. West of the bridge. Afternoon fare would have been behind them. Then whatever's shining is coming from below, Claire said softly. Not above. She adjusted the infrared layer. New details surfaced. The waterline glowed faintly, like phosphorescence. Around the sisters' feet, concentric rings of light spread outward, almost symmetrical, like the aperture of a camera. Mrs. Dugan crossed herself. Mercy! The scanner beeped again. One last frame processed. In this version, the girl's eyes caught the flash differently. Their pupils reflected a bright pinpoint. When Claire magnified that reflection, she froze. Inside each eye, mirrored perfectly, was the same lantern shape. Rain was falling harder by the time she left the museum. The river looked swollen, its surface pitted by drops. Across the street, the courthouse clock struck 5. She could almost hear Ruth Keene's whisper inside the sound. Too bright. At the diner, the waitress greeted her with a look that was half sympathy, half warning. Word travels fast, she said. I heard you woke the ghosts. I scanned a photograph. Same thing. The woman poured coffee. You should know, that photographer you asked about, Henry Ellison, had a brother. Runs the junk shop by the feed mill. Name's Cal. He doesn't talk much, but he's still got some of Henry's things. Things? Boxes of them. Cameras, reels, pictures that didn't come out right. Claire finished her coffee, thanked her, and drove toward the edge of town. The rain tapered to drizzle as she turned down a narrow lane lined with cottonwoods. The shop was more shack than store, its windows stacked with radios, broken clocks, metal signs. A wooden placard above the door read, Ellison's Repairs. Everything men's. Inside, dust motes drifted through weak yellow light. Behind the counter sat a thin man with nicotine-stained fingers and eyes the color of river silt. Looking for something? He asked. I'm making a film about the Lathrop case. Your brother, Henry, took the last picture of them. Cal's expression didn't change. That's what they say. You have his negatives? He shook his head. Water took most of them, but I've got what came back. He disappeared into the back room, returning with a small metal box. Inside were strips of warped film, edges blackened by moisture. He laid one against the window so light could pass through. Claire's breath caught. The river again. Same angle, same girls. But in this frame, they weren't smiling. They were looking up, faces tense, as if listening. Behind them shimmered a faint vertical line of light, like an open door standing in the water. Where did this come from? She asked. Camera washed up 3 days after Henry did, Cal said. Sheriff kept it for years, gave it back when the case went cold. Can I borrow these? He shook his head. You can look, not take. Some things don't like leaving Stillwater. That night, in her motel, she digitized the negatives frame by frame. The river shimmered across her screen, grainy but alive. In the 5th frame, she caught it again. The 4th figure, half submerged, face indistinct. In the sixth, he lifted his lantern higher, flooding the water with light. And in the seventh frame, the camera seemed to tilt upward, as though someone else had grabbed it. Across the blurred sky, lightning shaped itself into a single word she could almost read. Come. Claire shut the laptop, pulse hammering. Through the window, Stillwater Bridge glowed faintly against the clouds, its reflection flickering as if something beneath were breathing light back toward the surface. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving Stillwater rinsed clean and strangely hollow. Mist clung to the riverbanks like unspooled film, curling above the bridge before burning off in the sunlight. Claire drove past the diner, past the fairgrounds where rusted rides sagged like skeletons. Her destination was the town archives, the only place likely to hold any trace of Henry Ellison's last movements. Inside, the archivist was a man named Miles Crane, thin, spectacled, and suspicious of anyone who didn't smell like microfilm. Claire introduced herself, explaining she was researching the Lathrop disappearance and a photographer named Ellison. Miles brightened faintly, the way small-town archivists do when their dusty vaults suddenly matter. Henry Ellison, he said, rolling his chair to a filing cabinet. Traveling documentarian. Worked for American Folklore Review in the early 70s. Showed up here about 2 weeks before the fair. Claimed he was capturing small-town America. Vanished July 21st, 1972. He pulled out a folder thick with yellowed papers. Sheriff's reports, clippings, the works. Claire scanned through the records. Henry had stayed at the Willow Bend Motel, paid cash. Witnesses remembered his accent, southern, polite, and that he always carried a lantern, for night exposures. The last sighting placed him near the bridge the same evening the Lathrop girls vanished. Miles leaned forward. You know the odd part? His car turned up in the woods 2 days later. Keys still in the ignition, camera tripod on the front seat. Lantern was missing. Was there film in the camera? Claire asked. Exposed but undeveloped. Sheriff said it was blank, overexposed to light. That's how it got the legend, the light beneath the bridge. Folks started calling it ghost photography. Claire took notes, mind racing. Do you know if he mailed any work before he disappeared? Miles pointed to a ledger. He sent 2 packages to a Kansas City editor. The second arrived after he was declared missing. What was in it? Miles smiled slightly. That's the question. The package was empty when it arrived. Torn open from the inside, they said. Like something had burned through. That afternoon, Claire drove to the motel where Ellison had stayed. The building still existed, a sagging strip of cabins facing the highway. The owner, an elderly woman named Myrna, remembered him well. He had kind eyes, she said, leading Claire to the door of cabin 6. Always polite. Talked about the light on the river like it was alive. What do you mean? He said it followed him, Myrna replied, unlocking the door. Said he could hear it humming at night. The cabin smelled of damp wood and tobacco, wallpaper peeled in long strips. Myrna left her alone, and Claire began her usual sweep. Photos, floorboards, vents. The place yielded nothing until she crouched beside the radiator. A fragment of metal glinted between the slats. She pried it free. A corroded camera lens cap, engraved faintly with initials H.E. She turned it over. Inside, scratched by hand, were 4 numbers, 3-14-79-6. They didn't match any date she recognized. Latitude and longitude, maybe? She jotted them down and slipped the cap into her pocket. Evening brought her back to the motel downtown. She set up her map, cross-referencing the numbers. The coordinates pointed to a spot just outside Stillwater, an inlet of the river known locally as Lantern's Bend. The name twisted her stomach. Her phone buzzed, a voicemail from Sheriff Penner. Claire, you need to come by the station. Something's come up, about that photographer you mentioned. When she arrived, the sheriff looked as though he hadn't slept. "We got a hit on that name you asked about," he said. "Henry Ellison wasn't alone back then," he said. "Henry Ellison wasn't alone back then. He traveled with a woman, assistant, maybe more. Her name was Grace Holler. We found her last address." "Where?" "Riverton, 2 counties over. Thing is, she died in 1989, but her daughter's still around. Name's Amy Holler. Runs a used bookstore." Claire's pulse quickened. "Can you give me the address?" He nodded, scribbling it on a notepad. "Just be careful, Rowan. This case, people get lost in it. Start thinking the light's calling to them. I'm not superstitious, Sheriff." Neither was Henry Ellison. The next morning, the road to Riverton wound through cornfields, silvered by fog. Claire found the bookstore on a quiet side street, its sign hand-painted, Holler's Books and Sundries. Inside, the air smelled of dust and paper. A woman in her 40s looked up from behind the counter, her resemblance to the photographs of Grace unmistakable. The same sharp jawline, the same guarded eyes. "You're here about my mother," Amy said before Claire could speak. "People only come here for 2 reasons, books or ghosts. You don't look like a reader." Claire smiled faintly. "I'm making a film about the Stillwater disappearances." "Your mother worked with Henry Ellison?" "She did. She carried his equipment, took notes, developed film in bathtubs when they couldn't find dark rooms. She quit after Stillwater. Why?" Amy's eyes shifted to the window. "She said the river whispered to her. Kept saying Henry wanted to go back one last time, to show the light what it looked like from the other side." "What did she mean?" Amy hesitated, then reached under the counter, producing a sealed envelope, yellow with age. "My mother told me to give this to the first person who asked about him after 50 years. Claire accepted it carefully. Inside was a single contact sheet of negatives and a note in faded ink. "If you see the light, don't look too long. It remembers faces." H.E. That night, Claire spread the negatives across her motel desk. They were overexposed, murky. But one frame stood out. Stillwater Bridge, luminous beneath moonlight. At the center of the reflection stood not 3 girls, but 4, and a faint outline of a man holding a lantern. As she stared, the image seemed to shimmer, and her laptop screen flickered to life though she hadn't touched it. A video file appeared, time-stamped July 21st, 1972. No such file existed on her drive an hour earlier. She opened it. Grainy footage filled the screen. Water, rippling. A camera swayed as someone waded into the river. A woman's voice, Grace's, whispered, "Henry, it's too deep," before the picture flared white, then black. A final frame lingered. The 3 Lathrop girls on the shore, smiling nervously, as Henry's voice said, "Hold still. The light's coming." Then the file ended. Claire sat motionless. Outside her window, the Stillwater Bridge glowed faintly in the distance, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. By dawn, the fog had thickened into a milky veil that muted every sound. The highway outside Claire's window was empty, as though Stillwater itself had stopped breathing. She packed her camera, waterproof case, and drone. The coordinates from Ellison's lens cap led to a narrow road winding down toward the river's curve. Lantern's Bend. Locals claimed it was cursed water, too deep, too cold, lightless even at noon. Half the fishing boats in town avoided it. A drowned pocket, Sheriff Penner once called it, where the current reversed itself like an eddy in time. Claire parked by a rusted gate and hiked the last quarter-mile on foot. Grass brushed her knees. The air smelled of algae and wet earth. When the trees finally broke, she saw it. A crescent-shaped inlet, cupping the far side of Stillwater Bridge. The morning sun skimmed the surface, silver and calm. She unfolded the drone and launched it. On the screen, the inlet stretched like a dark pupil amid the pale water. She adjusted altitude, zoomed in. Something shimmered below. A metallic glint, not quite movement. Maybe debris, maybe the ghost of light Ruth Keene had spoken about. She switched to infrared. A faint heat bloom pulsed beneath the center, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. Then her screen cut to static. Claire blinked, tapped the controls. The drone feed flickered back, but the camera had rotated toward the shore. There, framed in a stand of willows, a figure in a dark coat stood watching her. Too far to see the face. "Hello," she called, voice swallowed by mist. No answer. When she looked again, the figure was gone. She retrieved the drone, heart thudding, and decided to check the inlet herself. The shallows lapped cool against her boots. She crouched, lowering the camera to film the surface. Beneath, reeds swayed in slow motion. The reflection of the bridge rippled, and in that mirrored image she saw not one figure, but three. Girls, holding hands. Her breath caught. The water shimmered, and she could almost hear laughter, faint, high, familiar from old family reels. Then, as suddenly, silence. She stepped back onto solid ground, forcing her heartbeat down. The rational part of her mind catalogued possibilities. Light refraction, fatigue, suggestion. Yet the image lingered, too vivid to dismiss. Back in town, Claire uploaded the drone footage at the diner. The waitress poured her coffee without asking. "Lanterns Bend, huh? My daddy used to warn us kids not to go there. Said it pulls at you, what do you mean? Said the water remembers who it's taken?" Claire tried to smile, but the woman's eyes were serious. "You believe that?" "I believe in things we can't name," the waitress said. "You should too." At the sheriff's office, Penner looked exhausted. "You shouldn't have gone down there alone," he said when she mentioned Lanterns Bend. "River's dangerous. Couple divers got caught in snags there years back. I need a permit to dredge a section," she replied. "Just a few feet, right where those coordinates land." Penner hesitated. "What exactly do you think you'll find?" "A camera. Maybe a lantern. Maybe Henry Ellison himself." He sighed. "I can get you a sonar scan. No divers yet. Deal?" Claire agreed. That afternoon, they launched the patrol boat from the east dock. The sheriff operated the sonar monitor while she filmed. The device swept arcs beneath the surface, converting darkness to grainy shapes. "Depth's about 40 feet, Penner said. "That's strange. There's a hollow here, like a shelf carved into the bank." He adjusted the frequency. "And something metal at the bottom." The monitor displayed a rough outline, rectangular, half buried. Claire's pulse spiked. "Can you mark it?" "Already done." He shut down the motor. "We'll send the retrieval team tomorrow." As they headed back, she watched the river glint in the dying light. For a moment, the reflection of the bridge shimmered gold, as though someone below had lifted a lantern toward her. That night, sleep refused to come. The rain returned, soft but steady. Claire sat at the desk, replaying the drone footage frame by frame. Halfway through, during the moment the feed had glitched, a still image appeared between frames, too quick for the naked eye. She froze it. 3 blurred shapes in mid-water, their outlines bright white, faces indistinct. Beside them, a man's arm extended, holding the lantern. The glow wasn't from the lamp. It was from inside the man's chest, as if his ribs had become glass. A knock startled her. She crossed to the door. Sheriff Penner stood drenched under the porch light. "We've got a problem," he said quietly. "The retrieval crew we called for tomorrow?" They just radioed in from the highway. One of their trucks slid off the embankment. Driver swears he saw a light in the road right before he hit it. "What kind of light?" Penner looked uneasy. Said it looked like someone waving him down with a lantern. When he left, the motel fell silent again. Claire stared at the Polaroid on the nightstand, the same worn image she'd studied 100 times. For the first time, she noticed water stains spreading from the lower edge, darkening the paper. She touched it. Her fingertip came away damp. Outside, thunder rolled, and across the river, Lantern's bend glowed faintly, 3 circles of light pulsing in sequence, as though beckoning her back. She whispered to herself, "Tomorrow, I'll see what's really down there," but even as she spoke, her reflection in the window didn't move. The next morning broke colorless, low clouds pressing down on the valley, the kind of sky that made the river look like metal. Sheriff Penner's boat idled near Lantern's Bend, its motor coughing softly against the current. 2 divers in black suits prepped their lines while Claire adjusted her camera gear, hands trembling from caffeine and something less nameable. "This shelf runs about 40 feet, Penner said, scanning his notes. "Whatever's down there, it's been sitting in silt since the 70s. Visibility will be bad. Just get me footage," Claire replied. "Anything recognizable." The divers nodded, sealed their masks, and rolled backward into the water. Air bubbles rose in silver streams. Claire kept the lens trained on the surface until both men disappeared into murk. Minutes crawled. The radio hissed with static. Then one diver's voice broke through. "Reaching the shelf now, silt heavy. Something metallic. Looks like a box. Wait, it's..." The signal fractured. Then silence. Penner frowned. "Diver 1, respond." Nothing. Claire leaned over the side, heart hammering. The river had gone still, the mist closing like a curtain. A moment later, the second diver's line twitched violently. He surfaced first, gasping. "Something moved down there," he sputtered. "It's not just debris." "What did you see?" Claire asked, kneeling beside him. He shook his head, eyes wide. "It looked like a light, coming from inside the silt. Then a hand, pale as bone. It brushed my mask." Penner barked into the radio until the first diver answered, breathless but alive. "I've got the object," he said. "Metal box, camera-sized, pulling up now." Together they hauled the line. A rusted case broke the surface, dripping black mud. The diver climbed aboard behind it, face gray. "You should see what else is down there," he murmured. "There are shapes, like mannequins." But soft Claire's stomach tightened. She focused the camera as Penner pried the latch with a knife. The box hissed as water escaped. Inside lay a corroded 16mm film canister and a small brass lantern, its glass intact, faintly tinted green. Even after half a century, a soft luminescence pulsed within, as if something inside still burned. Penner swore under his breath. "You seeing that, Rowan?" "Yes," she whispered, eyes wide. "Don't touch the glass." The light dimmed as if sensing their attention, then flared once, enough to reflect in the river's surface. For a heartbeat, Claire thought she saw faces there. 3 girls, smiling the way they did in the Polaroid, hair drifting like riverweed. Then it was gone. Back at the sheriff's office, the evidence lay sealed on a steel table. A hazmat technician cataloged the canister while Claire reviewed her footage. Frame by frame, the lantern's glow persisted even after it was sealed, visible through opaque plastic. The frequency analyzer registered no known emission. "It's bioluminescence, maybe," Penner offered, though his voice lacked conviction. "Or a reaction to oxygen after all these years." "Or it's the same light Ellison saw," Claire said quietly. "The one he followed." They sent the canister to the state lab for decontamination and film recovery. The technician warned them, if the film's intact, it's a miracle. That night, Claire stayed late at the station, reviewing old reports. In a 1972 witness statement, a fisherman had described a lantern burning underwater, near the same bend, followed by a woman's voice singing. His account had been dismissed as alcohol-induced. Now she wasn't so sure. The office clock read 2:13 a.m. when her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A man's voice, hoarse, whispering, "You shouldn't have taken it." "Who is this?" "You woke it. It remembers the faces the line went dead." Claire stood frozen. Across the room, the sealed evidence container pulsed once, faintly green through the plastic. The light rippled across the walls like reflected water. Morning brought news from the state lab. The technician sounded shaken. "We managed to develop portions of the film," he said. "You'd better come see this yourself." Claire and Penner drove 3 hours to Jefferson City. In the sterile lab, a screen displayed frames recovered from the 16mm reel. Grainy but clear enough. Henry Ellison's handwriting on a slate. Lanterns Bend, July 21st, 1972. The footage began with the river at twilight, surface still, the three sisters waiting near the bridge. Their laughter carried faintly. The camera panned left, to Henry himself, reflected in the water, holding the lantern. His lips moved, speaking words unheard. Then the film shuddered, image distorting as if the camera had been submerged. In the final frames, something massive loomed beneath the surface. A shape of light, undulating, drawing the girls toward it. Their faces blurred, arms outstretched, then vanished into white. The reel ended. Silence filled the lab. Penner cleared his throat. "We need to close this case, Rowan. Whatever this is, it's done." But Claire couldn't look away. The last frame of light lingered on the monitor, edges flickering like breath. If she tilted her head just right, she could almost make out a reflection within it. Her own face staring back. Back in Stillwater that evening, she stood by the bridge again. The lantern from the river lay locked in evidence, but the water below shimmered faintly, pulsing with unseen life. She raised her camera, hesitating. For a moment she thought she heard a child's voice on the breeze. "Hold still." "The light's coming." She lowered the lens, tears pricking her eyes. "I see it," she whispered, and the river glowed brighter. The day after the film's discovery, Stillwater felt wrong, too bright, too hushed, as if the town itself were holding its breath. The river moved slow and glassy under the bridge, reflecting a sky the color of bone. Sheriff Penner called it calm after commotion. Claire thought it felt more like anticipation. At her motel desk, she replayed the digitized reel until her eyes blurred. The more she watched, the more the footage seemed to change. The light beneath the surface pulsed in different rhythms, like breathing. On the 10th viewing, she noticed something new. A flicker in the upper corner of the final frame. Zoomed in, it resolved into a faint reflection. Someone standing behind the camera, a silhouette smaller than Henry Ellison's. Feminine. Watching him film. Grace Holler. Claire exhaled. "You weren't just his assistant, were you?" she murmured. She froze the frame again and thought she saw the woman's head turn slightly, as though aware of being seen. That evening she met Penner at the courthouse. He looked older than he had yesterday. "State wants the reel," he said. "They'll classify it as evidence in an ongoing investigation." "Investigation into what?" she asked. He hesitated. "Chain of custody violation, contamination. They don't like unsolved things being sacred." Claire knew that meant the footage would disappear into some archive where no one would ever see it again. "Let me have one more night with it," she said. "For the documentary." Penner studied her face, then sighed. "One night. But I'm keeping the key." He slid a USB copy across the table. "You didn't get that from me." Back in her room, she transferred the file to her laptop. As it rendered, the screen darkened. The reflection of her own face floated faintly over the progress bar. For a moment, she wasn't sure if it was hers or someone else's. The eyes seemed older, sadder. When the file finished, she played it again. The light below the bridge burned more intensely now, filling the frame. Then a ripple of static washed through the image, and sound bled in. Muted voices, indistinct at first, then clearer. A child's whisper. "Hold still," another voice, female. "It's too bright." Then, faintly, a man's laugh. Ellison's, she thought. But it echoed wrong, looping in reverse like a tape rewound too far. The footage trembled, then steadied. The girl's figure stood waist-deep in the river, reaching upward toward the unseen camera. Something moved behind them, a shadow under the water, immense, formless, luminous. It extended tendrils of light toward their hands. Claire leaned closer, breath fogging the screen. For a moment, she felt warmth on her skin, as if the glow radiated outward from the laptop. When the light engulfed the frame, she caught a glimpse of another face, her own, reflected in the water, camera in hand. Then the file cut to black. The power flickered. Her laptop screen went dark, then rebooted itself, displaying a single folder labeled Footage July 21st. Inside were 3 new files she hadn't created, each named after one of the Lathrop sisters. She opened the first. Static, then water. The view looked upward from below, as if filmed from the riverbed. Shafts of light pierced the surface, and within them, 3 figures floated, motionless, hair drifting like seaweed. When the camera panned closer, one girl opened her eyes. Claire recoiled. The eyes were cloudy, filmed over, but they moved, tracking the lens. "Jesus," she whispered. The second file opened on its own. The image was darker, closer to the surface. The same girls, but now standing on what looked like dry ground. A voice off camera whispered, "Smile." They obeyed. The flash of light followed, too bright, swallowing everything. The third file refused to play. When she tried, the screen showed only her reflection and the faint outline of the Stillwater Bridge behind her, even though she was indoors. Then text appeared across the image. She was the one who looked back. The laptop shut itself off. Penner banged on her door moments later. "Rowan, you need to come with me." She opened it, still shaking. "What happened?" "Lab called again," he said. "Technician who developed the film collapsed this morning. They say he was talking about seeing his own reflection moving in the reels. He's dead." They drove to the hospital through sheets of rain. The coroner said heart failure, but Penner looked unconvinced. "You think this is connected?" she asked. He rubbed his temples. "I think this whole town's been living in the reflection of something we don't understand." He pulled the car over near the bridge. Rain misted the windshield, turning the headlights into twin halos. "You need to leave Stillwater, Rowan. Tonight." She stared at the water. Beneath the surface, faint glimmers pulsed like heartbeat traces. "I can't," she said softly. "It isn't finished. Whatever Ellison was chasing, he found it. Don't make the same mistake." She turned toward him. "Maybe the mistake was walking away before we understood what the light was showing." Penner shook his head. "You think the river gives answers? It only mirrors what's already broken." She returned to her motel close to midnight. The Polaroid lay where she'd left it. The water stains had spread again, forming ripples that looked eerily like fingerprints. She held it up to the lamp, and the lantern's faint glow from the day before shimmered across the surface. The girls' reflections appeared brighter now, and between them, just visible, was another silhouette. Hers. Her phone buzzed. One new message, no number. A single line of text. "Tomorrow. 4:42. She looked up. Across the river, Stillwater Bridge flared with light, sudden and white, as if someone beneath it had just lit a lantern. Morning light bled through the motel curtains like weak tea. Claire hadn't slept. The text, "Tomorrow, 4:42, glowed on her phone, unanswered. She kept checking the clock, half expecting the numbers to rearrange themselves. The Polaroid lay on the desk beside the drained coffee cups, its surface dry again. Water stains now shaped like ripples spreading outward from a central point. At 8 a.m., Sheriff Penner called. "The lab's sending the film and the lantern back to us," he said. "State wants it sealed and archived. We can log it this afternoon." Claire heard exhaustion in his voice, but also fear. "I need one more look before you lock it away," she said. "Whatever's inside that light, It's trying to show us something. Penner exhaled. Fine. Noon at the evidence room. But that's it, Rowan. After today, I'm closing the file. The courthouse basement was cold and windowless, the fluorescent bulbs buzzing faintly. The lantern sat on a steel table inside a clear containment box, its brass casing dull, the glass faintly iridescent. The 16mm reel rested beside it, spooled tight, labeled in a new hand, recovered footage, Ellison, 1972. Claire adjusted her camera and hit record. Evidence log, July 21st, 2025, she said softly. 53 years since the disappearance of the Lathrop sisters. This is what remains. Penner stood behind her, arms folded. Make it quick. She leaned close to the glass. The lantern's glow was faint but steady, a rhythm like breath. The girls appeared in multiple exposures, she said into the recorder, each time brighter, as if the film itself were. The light flared suddenly. Both she and Penner stepped back. The containment box fogged on the inside, moisture condensing into thin trails that formed words before evaporating. Look down! Claire froze. Did you see? Penner's jaw tightened. Yeah. The floor vibrated. A low, resonant hum, like machinery waking underground. The lantern dimmed again, returning to its heartbeat glow. That's it, Penner said. We're done. He reached for the box, but as his hands brushed the glass, the lantern flashed again, projecting a brief beam across the wall. For an instant, the concrete surface shimmered like water. And in that reflection, Claire saw 4 figures standing beneath Stillwater Bridge, 3 children and herself. Her camera caught everything. They drove to the river without speaking, clouds pressed low, muting the light. The bridge rose out of the mist, rusted but graceful, its reflection perfect in the still water. Penner parked near the guardrail and killed the engine. You really think this place is alive? He asked. I think it remembers, she said. She walked to the edge, filming. The river looked shallow but deceptive, its surface bright, its depth unknowable. The sound of the current was hypnotic, whispering against the banks like a voice half understood. She glanced at her watch. 4:41 p.m. Penner stood a few paces behind her. Rowan, don't. Too late. The surface rippled, concentric circles spreading outward from the center of the bend. The light beneath the water brightened, pulsing. She stepped closer, transfixed. The reflection of the bridge wavered, splitting in two, revealing something beneath, the faint outline of faces, eyes open, smiling. The lantern in Penner's evidence bag began to hum. Its glow seeped through the canvas, growing hotter, brighter, until the sheriff dropped it with a curse. The moment it hit the ground, the light burst upward, pure, white, silent. The river erupted. Claire's camera jerked in her hands as the current roared. Sheets of light tore through the mist, illuminating the bridge's underside. Within the water, shapes moved, girls' figures rising slowly, their outlines defined by light rather than flesh. The reflection inverted. Water above, sky below. Penner shouted her name. I see it, Claire, I see it. And the light swallowed the rest. The glow enveloped her, warm and cold at once. Through the blinding white, she saw the 3 sisters reach toward her, their mouths forming words she couldn't hear. Then she understood. They were repeating what the text message had said. Tomorrow, 4:42. The world flickered like film burning in a projector. She felt weightless, then submerged, suspended between breaths. When the light receded, she was kneeling on the riverbank, coughing, drenched. The water had stilled again. Penner was gone. His truck sat empty, door open, headlights still on. On the driver's seat lay his badge, soaking wet. The camera beside her beeped, still recording. She lifted it weakly, pointed it at the river. In the reflection, 4 figures stood hand in hand beneath the bridge, luminous against the darkness. 3 children, 1 woman. The 4th reflection smiled and raised a camera. Claire watched the footage later that night, back at the motel, shivering in a blanket. Her own face in the recording looked calm, peaceful, nothing like how she'd felt. The timestamp on the video read 4:42:00 exactly. Behind her reflected image, the water glowed until the frame faded to white. She pressed pause. Her reflection on the black screen lingered half a second longer than it should have, then smiled, without her moving. The next morning, the motel manager found her room empty, coffee still steaming, lights on, camera rolling. The bed unslept. On the table lay the Polaroid, now completely white except for one faint outline. 4 silhouettes standing beneath a bridge, hands joined. In the corner, a note written in her handwriting. They weren't lost. They were waiting for someone to remember. The camera's battery died at 4:42. Outside, the river flowed smooth and silent. Beneath Stillwater Bridge, the light pulsed once more. 4 glimmers now instead of 3, then dimmed as if finally at rest. The following morning, Stillwater woke to news that sounded like déjà vu. Another disappearance, this time, not in 1954 or 1972, but now. Claire Rowan, 36, investigative documentarian, last seen near the old bridge before dusk. Her car found idling on the shoulder. Her motel room door unlocked. Camera rolling. Locals gathered at Lou's Diner the way they always did when Stillwater chose someone. Heads bent, voices lowered. Coffee cooling between their hands. The waitress, Lila, flipped through a local paper still wet with ink. "She came in here 3 days ago," she murmured. Sat right there. Asked about the Holloway family, the old vanishings, the bridge. She said the river could remember no one met her eyes. By noon, Sheriff Penner's truck had been pulled from the same embankment where the Holloway 5 were last seen 70 years earlier. The passenger door was open, but there were no footprints. Just a single damp Polaroid on the driver's seat, showing the bridge at twilight. Beneath it, faint pencil letters. For the keeper. That night, the town council reconvened in the courthouse basement. The lantern sat sealed again, but this time its glow was steady, pulsing every 10 seconds like a heartbeat. Deputy Eames kept his distance. "Should we power it off?" he asked. "It's not powered," replied Dr. Adair, the state archivist sent to retrieve the object. "It's chemical luminescence, or something older. We're transferring it to Austin tomorrow." "What about Rowan?" Eames pressed. Adair didn't look up. "If she entered that water, there's no recovering her." But in the corner of the evidence room, the camera recovered from Claire's motel desk continued to hum faintly. When Adair rewound the tape that evening to log it, the footage began where it shouldn't have, after the recorded end. The image was underwater, wavering, soft blue light filtering from above. A hand reached into the frame, slender, pale. Claire's voice, muffled but calm. "I can see them now. Not ghosts. Reflections that outlast the body. The river doesn't take. It keeps Adair stop the playback, heart hammering." The frame froze on Claire's reflection within the light, smiling faintly, holding the lantern, though the real lantern remained sealed on his desk. 2 days later, the transfer van never reached Austin. It was found 30 miles south, door open, driver gone. Only the lantern remained, resting upright in the middle of the asphalt, its glow extinguished for the first time since its discovery. The FBI investigation concluded environmental interference caused mechanical failure and navigation loss. But the file was never released to the public. Months passed. The town of Stillwater resumed its quiet routines, as if silence could overwrite history. Children walked past the memorial plaques without reading the names. The bridge rusted further, its girders trembling in the wind. Only Lila, the waitress, left fresh flowers every Sunday at the guardrail. That winter, she found a note tucked beneath the bouquet. The handwriting was neat, familiar. They're home. Don't mourn. Remember. Signed, C.R. Spring Thaw brought heavy floods, and with them, a discovery that shattered the official narrative. The current had stripped away decades of silt from the limestone basin below Stillwater Bridge. Within the exposed sinkhole lay a skeleton clutching the frame of a camera, the same model used by Claire. Forensic tests confirmed what many feared. It was not her body, but that of a man who had vanished in 1954, Henry Holloway, the cousin's eldest brother. Inside the corroded camera, the film somehow survived. When developed, it showed 5 children standing in front of the bridge, but at the edge of the frame, reflected in the water, was another figure, a woman holding a lantern, her face unmistakable. Claire. The technician swore the image had not been tampered with. The emulsion was authentic to the 1950s. When the negatives reached Dr. Adair, he locked them in an archive vault, labeling the folder simply, The Keeper Phenomenon. Privately, he told his assistant he could still hear the faint ticking sound from inside the sealed box, like an old film reel winding itself. In late autumn, a restoration crew dismantled part of the old bridge for safety. Beneath the steel plating, workers found an embedded time capsule, glass jar sealed with wax, dated 1954. Inside were photos. The Holloway cousins, smiling, carefree. And one final picture, the same image that had haunted generations, the 5 children standing before the river. But this print was pristine, its colors unaged. On the back, in handwriting modern and fluid, was a single sentence: "The lantern keeps what the river cannot." No one could explain how the photograph could have been placed there after the bridge's original construction. That winter, during a snowstorm, Lila closed the diner early. As she locked up, she noticed faint light through the mist, down by the water. She hesitated, then followed the glow to the bank. The river was glass smooth, the moon reflected perfectly. There, half buried in frost, stood the lantern. Cold to the touch, its surface dusted with snow. When she picked it up, the glass caught her face, and for an instant, another reflection appeared beside hers. Claire's, smiling faintly, eyes bright with recognition. Lila staggered back, dropping the lantern. It rolled once and came to rest facing the bridge. The reflection on its glass surface shimmered. Not her own this time, but 5 children waving, their outlines slowly fading as though receding into depthless light. Then the glow died. When the sheriff's office retrieved the object the next morning, it was inert. No light, no hum. They placed it in storage. But Lila never spoke of what she saw, except to leave one final note taped beneath the diner counter before she moved away that spring. Every town has a lantern keeper. When we forget, the light returns to remind us. In 2026, a small documentary premiered quietly online. The title card read, "The Holloway River, a Memory That Breathes." It featured recovered audio logs from Claire Rowan, stitched with her footage. The final frame showed the bridge at sunset, water calm, no reflections. Except one. Claire's silhouette standing beneath the arch, camera raised. Her voice, soft and steady. Close the film. Some stories end when we stop looking. Others begin there. This was never about vanishing. It was about being seen fade to black. A faint pulse of light shimmered beneath the closing credits, barely perceptible. 3 beats, then a 4th, then none. The film should have gone unnoticed. A quiet upload on a Thursday night, hidden beneath millions of louder stories. But by dawn, the Holloway River, a memory that breathes, had reached 200,000 views. Within a week, it was everywhere. Shared, dissected, imitated. The footage of Claire's reflection and the still frame of the children waving ignited an obsession that no one in Stillwater was prepared for. The town, once a forgotten dot on the state map, became a pilgrimage site for ghost hunters and true crime tourists. They came in rented cars and news vans, filming the bridge at night, whispering as if afraid to wake the water. Someone even sold lantern keeper shirts outside Lou's diner. Lila, now returned reluctantly to help her cousin run the place, hated the cameras. She kept her apron high and her eyes down whenever someone asked where Claire had stood or whether she believed the stories were true. "Believe," she told one reporter. "Doesn't matter what I believe. Around here, belief is just the entry fee." But she did believe, at least enough to avoid driving across the bridge after dark. Detective Penner's badge remained displayed in the courthouse lobby, mounted between the Holloway memorial plaques. The new sheriff, Carla Dunn, had reopened his final notes. They contained a single line written the morning of his disappearance. "If I go back to the bridge, and you don't hear from me, tell Claire I understand." Dunn played the recovered camera tapes again and again, searching for something the internet had missed. The freeze frames, the warped reflections, the faint sound under the audio hiss that listeners swore was breathing. For weeks she found nothing, until one night she slowed the final minute to quarter speed. The frame where Claire raised her camera at the water flickered. For one split second, just one, there was another image layered behind it. The outline of a man standing beside her, hand on her shoulder. Dunn froze the playback, enhanced the light. It was Penner, and both figures were smiling. By early spring, Stillwater's mayor petitioned to have the bridge sealed off. "The influx is ruining us," she said at a town hall meeting. "Let the river rest." But her motion failed. Too many locals had begun renting rooms, guiding tours, selling copies of the documentary DVD. Stillwater was alive again, for the first time in decades. Alive, yes, but uneasy. Visitors reported strange phenomena: camera batteries draining, radio static filled with children's laughter, fog that condensed only around the lantern monument. At least a dozen claimed to see ripples forming names on the river's surface. Claire, Henry, Lucia, before fading. The sheriff called it pareidolia. Others called it proof. One night, Lila closed the diner and found a folded map on the counter. It wasn't there minutes earlier. The paper was old, yellowed. A red X marked a spot several miles north of the bridge, Old Quarry Road. On the back, scrawled in faint pencil, "Show them the reflection, no signature." Against her better judgment, she went. The quarry had long been dry, its pit overgrown with reeds. The moon hung low, light pooling like quicksilver. As she descended the slope, her phone flashlight flickered, then died. She kept going, guided only by instinct and memory. At the basin's center stood a shallow pool, too small to be natural, perfectly circular, reflecting the sky like a mirror. She knelt beside it, brushing away leaves. The water was cold, impossibly clear. Beneath its surface, something metallic glinted. She reached in, fingers trembling, and pulled out a rusted locket. Inside was a miniature photo, 5 cousins smiling. But behind them, she noticed something faint that hadn't appeared in any other copy of the picture. A lantern burning in daylight. A noise behind her made her spin around. A figure stood at the top of the ridge, silhouetted by moonlight. She couldn't make out the face, but the posture, the tilt of the head, was unmistakable. "Claire!" Lila called out. No answer. The figure raised a camera, flash blinking once. When Lila's vision cleared, the ridge was empty. She looked back down at the pool. The reflection now showed 2 figures, herself and Claire, standing side by side. The light between them shimmered. Then, faintly, she heard Claire's voice, soft but distinct. Remember what you see, not what they tell you. By morning, she turned the locket over to Sheriff Dunn, who placed it next to the inert lantern in evidence. "You think Rowan's still alive?" Dunn asked quietly. Lila shook her head. Alive's not the word. Later that week, the sheriff authorized one final search dive beneath Stillwater Bridge. Sonar mapped the riverbed, but the feed began to distort halfway through. The diver's radio cut out, replaced by a faint humming. When he resurfaced, he was shaking, his oxygen gauge still half full. "What did you see?" Dunn asked. He stared past her, eyes wide. "Lights," he whispered. "4 of them." They waved. The documentary eventually won a regional film award. The acceptance video was brief. A still frame of Claire's original logo, her initials CR overlapping like mirrored lenses, and a voiceover recorded years before her disappearance. The lens doesn't capture the truth. It reflects the parts we refuse to see. After that, the film vanished from all official platforms. Copies remained, of course, pirated, mirrored, endlessly re-uploaded, but each seemed subtly different. Some versions ended with 4 reflections in the river. Others showed 5. No one could agree which was real. On the first anniversary of Claire's disappearance, the lantern inside the courthouse storage flickered back to life. The night guard reported hearing footsteps in the corridor, bare feet slapping softly on linoleum, and the sound of a shutter clicking once. He found nothing, only the faint smell of river water and a fresh Polaroid on the evidence desk. The picture showed the bridge under full moonlight, written on the margin in handwriting no one recognized. "The memory breathes because we do." When the sheriff compared it to Claire's writing, the loops and strokes matched perfectly. By summer, the water level fell to its lowest in years. The sinkhole beneath the bridge dried enough for archaeologists to descend safely. They found fragments of wood, possibly from a camera tripod, dated 1954, 1972, and 2025. Layers stacked like sediment. One researcher remarked, "It's like the river's been recording time, one story on top of another." And at the very bottom, resting in the mud, was a single glass lens, modern, uncracked, etched faintly with initials that caught the sunlight. CR. When they lifted the lens from the sinkhole, it caught the sunlight like a living thing. For a moment, the archaeologist holding it, Dr. Kim, swore the glass pulsed, reflecting not her own face, but 5 small figures in the river behind her. When she blinked, they were gone. By afternoon, the lens was logged, sealed, and shipped to Austin for optical analysis, but it never arrived. Somewhere along the route, the courier van broke down near Holloway Ridge. Its driver found asleep at the wheel, pulse steady but unresponsive. The crate containing the lens sat untouched in the passenger seat, the wood faintly warm to the touch. When the driver finally woke, hours later, he claimed he had dreamed of water rising through the road and 5 children standing on its surface, whispering in unison, "We remember you." Sheriff Dunn didn't believe in curses, but she believed in patterns, and Stillwater had too many. Every 20 years something returned. The Holloway cousins in 1954, the Ellison girl in 72, the bridge collapse that killed the search team in 92, and now Claire Rowan's vanishing in 2025. 4 events, like the 4 pulses of the lantern's light, and one more, maybe still waiting. She reopened the case logs late at night when the courthouse was empty. The files smelled of mildew and river silt, as though the archives themselves were breathing. When she aligned the photos chronologically, 1954, 1972, 1992, 2025, something leapt out. Each frame showed the same faint outline of the bridge's shadow across the water. But the shape of that shadow had changed, tilted slightly east each time, as if tracking something buried beneath the current. She laid tracing paper over the images, connected the shifting edges, and drew a single continuous arc. It pointed directly to the quarry where Lila had found the locket. At dawn, Dunn drove there alone. The mist was thick, hanging low over the reeds. She parked near the same slope Lila had descended months before. The ground still bore faint footprints, hardened now in clay. In the basin, the circular pool remained, untouched, impossibly still. She crouched and saw her own reflection merge with the sky above. One world folded over another. Then she saw something else. Faint images flickering in the water's depth. Faces, hands, a camera lens spinning slowly like a planet. She pulled her recorder from her pocket. Sheriff's log, June 14th, 2026. Investigating potential evidence site. Water temperature approximately 48 degrees Fahrenheit. Reflection anomalies consistent with previously reported phenomena. Her own voice echoed back from the surface, warped. Not anomalies, it said. Memories. Dunn froze. Who's there? The reflection smiled, not her own expression. The surface rippled. Claire's face appeared serene, eyes luminous beneath the water. You're close, Claire whispered. But it's not the river. It's what they buried beneath it. Then the image shattered into concentric waves, revealing a glimpse of something metallic deep below. An iron grate or door, covered in sediment. By midday, Dunn returned with a team. Divers descended under her supervision. The camera feed cut through murky water, scanning the riverbed. At 20 feet, they found it. A sealed hatch embedded in limestone, marked by a faint engraving, a lantern surrounded by 5 stars. It wasn't natural. Someone had built it. They pried it open carefully, the hinges groaning. Inside was a chamber barely large enough for one person to crouch, lined with glass panels like mirrors. Not a grave, but a recorder built by people who were terrified of being erased. The air bubbles escaping shimmered with faint light. On the far wall, engraved words read, "If found, remember us kindly. We built this so memory won't drown." Within the chamber sat a rusted reel projector and dozens of film canisters, each labeled by hand. Holloway family, summer 1954. Claire Rowan raw footage. Bridge reflections, 1972. The divers surfaced carrying what they could. Dunn stood on the shore, breathless, watching them emerge with reels dripping river water. "We've been chasing ghosts," she murmured. But someone left a record. That night, the recovered reels played in the courthouse projection room. The images were silent, grainy, spliced together by an unseen editor. The first showed the Holloway children running through tall grass, laughing. Then the bridge, gleaming new. Then, abruptly, the same frame decades later. Bridge rusted, overgrown, water darker. A crossfade replaced the children with adults. Penner, Lila, Dunn herself. Faces that didn't belong in old film. The projection trembled. The reel clicked. The screen filled with static. And then Claire appeared, holding the lantern, smiling faintly. "If you're seeing this," she said, "then the river has chosen another keeper." The room fell silent. The film flickered, the edges of her voice breaking into static. The Holloway children weren't taken. They built the first reflection vault, an echo chamber for memory. It feeds on witness, not blood. Every 20 years it needs someone to remember, or it begins to erase. She looked directly into the lens. "Don't let Stillwater forget." The screen cut to white, then to black. Afterward, Dunn sat alone in the dark, the whir of the projector slowing. She looked at her reflection in the blank screen and thought she saw movement behind her. 5 small silhouettes and one taller, standing quietly, waiting. The lantern in evidence began to glow again, slow, steady. She picked it up, feeling warmth spread into her palms. For a moment, she understood what Claire meant. The light wasn't haunting. It was remembering. She whispered, "I see you." And somewhere deep in the river, a pulse answered, 4 beats, and a 5th. Weeks later, a new exhibit opened quietly in the county museum, the Holloway 5, Memory and Myth. Visitors filed through photographs, reels, artifacts. The lantern rested in the final display case, dark now, its glass clear. Beside it, a plaque read, "Recovered 2025 to 2026. Authorship unknown. Believed to represent the town's enduring memory of loss and return." When the lights dimmed each evening, staff swore they heard faint laughter echoing through the halls, children's voices overlapping with the click of a camera shutter. And sometimes, on closing nights, the lantern flickered once, reflected in the exhibit glass. 5 small figures, standing hand in hand beneath a bridge of light. The day the exhibit opened to the public, the town finally felt quiet again. For the first time in 70 years, Stillwater wasn't holding its breath. The river ran clear after a spring flood, the bridge newly reinforced, its girders glinting under sunlight. Families walked along the bank without looking over their shoulders, and yet, every night at precisely 4:42 a.m., the museum's motion sensors tripped, always in the same room, always facing the lantern's glass case. Security footage showed only the faint shimmer of waterlight on the floor, rippling though there was no source. Sheriff Dunn slept less, haunted by what Claire's final reel had said. Every 20 years, it needs someone to remember, or it begins to erase. On a late August morning, as heat shimmered over the town square, a group of high school students on a field trip gathered before the exhibit. Their teacher, Mrs. Greeley, recited the official narrative. The Holloway cousins had vanished mysteriously. Decades later, an investigative filmmaker named Claire Rowan had rediscovered their story. But one student, a quiet boy named Owen, wasn't listening. He'd been born on July 21st, 2005, exactly 51 years after the Holloway 5 disappeared. As he stared into the lantern's glass, the reflection didn't show his classmates behind him. It showed the bridge, dusk blue, and 5 children waiting at the edge. One lifted her hand, palm open. Owen blinked. The image was gone. That evening, he couldn't stop thinking about it. The gesture had felt deliberate, like an invitation. He biked down to the river after dark, ignoring his mother's warning about the curfew. The bridge stood silent, its iron ribs reflecting in perfect symmetry across the water. The moonlight painted everything silver. He crouched near the same embankment where the Holloway's car had once been found. The air smelled faintly of rain and rust. His flashlight beam caught something half buried near the shoreline, a shard of glass. He dug it out, a cracked lens, smooth-edged, warm despite the night air. When he lifted it to his eye, the world shifted. The river shimmered, its reflection deepening until it became a doorway of liquid light. He could see people standing beneath the surface, dozens of them, overlapping eras. Men in 1950s suits, women in bell-bottoms, a sheriff in tan uniform, a woman with a camera. Claire. She looked right at him. "You can say us," her voice whispered inside his head. "Then you're the next." "The next what?" he breathed, but the reflection rippled, distorting into white light. He dropped the lens. It vanished into the mud. Back in town, Sheriff Dunn was reviewing security logs when the call came in from the museum's night guard. "Sheriff," the man said, voice shaking, "it's the lantern. It's doing something." She sped there within minutes. The exhibit lights flickered, throwing shadows like ripples across the walls. The lantern glowed with steady brilliance now, bright enough to light the entire room. Through the glass, shapes moved within the glow, 5 figures, clearer than ever, the Holloway children. And behind them, a 6th silhouette, a teenage boy, Owen. Dunn's heart stopped. "No," she whispered, fumbling with the case lock. The moment the seal broke, the light surged outward, engulfing her. For an instant she stood not in the museum, but beneath the bridge at twilight, the air shimmered with silver mist. The 5 children faced her, holding hands. Owen stood among them, bewildered but calm. Claire appeared behind them, lantern in hand. "Every generation needs a keeper," she said gently. "Not to die here, to hold the record when the rest of the world starts rewriting it." "Send him back," Dunn pleaded. "He's just a boy." "I was just a woman with a camera," Claire said, smiling sadly. "It's not about age. It's about sight." He saw us when others looked away. The light brightened, the river rising around them without sound or weight. Dunn tried to move toward Owen, but her hands passed through the children like smoke. "Tell them," Claire's voice echoed. "Tell them what the light truly is." Then everything went white. She awoke on the museum floor, head pounding, surrounded by paramedics. The glass case lay shattered, but the lantern was gone. The only thing left inside was a single Polaroid. She picked it up with trembling fingers. 6 figures stood under Stillwater Bridge, 5 children and 1 older boy. In the reflection beneath them, her own face, watching. News spread quickly. "Museum lights vanish," the headlines read. Reporters returned. Pilgrims came again. But this time there was no footage to share, no strange glow on the river. Just silence. Owen was never found. His bike lay by the water's edge, tires spinning in the wind. His mother refused interviews, though she left a candle burning in her window every night until dawn. Sheriff Dunn resigned a month later. In her final report she wrote, "If the river remembers, then perhaps forgetting is mercy. But when the light calls again, someone will answer. They always do." She left Stillwater quietly, driving east until the bridge vanished from her rear-view mirror. Years passed. The river shifted course, swallowing the old quarry, erasing its edges. Stillwater shrank again, tourists gone, its stories folded into legend. But some nights, when fog rolled over the bridge, fishermen swore they saw light beneath the surface. 6 shapes glowing faintly, drifting together, their reflections forming a perfect circle. One man captured a photo on his phone. The image showed nothing unusual except a pale glimmer that, when enlarged, looked like a lantern's flame. And on the screen's corner, almost invisible, a time stamp appeared that hadn't been there before. 4:42. The river has never stopped moving. Even when Stillwater finally emptied, its shops shuttered, its diner turned to dust. The current carried on, slow and patient. When the bridge rusted through and was torn down, its shadow still lay across the water at noon, faint but visible, like a bruise on the surface of time. 50 years passed. Then another flood came, carving new channels through the valley. When the waters receded, a single object remained half buried in the silt where the bridge once stood. A brass lantern, glass cracked but still faintly luminous. Archaeologists logged it as Artifact 442A. None noticed that it pulsed in time with their heartbeats. The footage survived. A historian in St. Louis, Dr. Mira Adair's successor, compiled the fragments into a single archive. The Holloway reels, the Ellison negatives, Claire's final recordings, even a scan of the Polaroid. She called the collection the Stillwater Memory Project and streamed it publicly for the first time on July 21st, 2085. The opening sequence showed black water under moonlight. Then a voice, not Claire's, not Penner's, spoken softly but clear. If you can see the reflection, you're already part of it. The broadcast lasted exactly 4 minutes and 42 seconds. At its end, the screen filled with white light. That summer, strange things began happening across the country. Viewers reported hearing water running through their speakers even after the stream ended. Some claimed their mirrors fogged briefly, showing faces they didn't recognize. A few said they dreamed of a woman with a camera whispering, "Hold still." Scientists blamed suggestion, viral hallucination. But those who'd seen the bridge in person knew better. The reflection had simply widened. The river was no longer confined to still water. It lived wherever its story was told. In the fall, a young filmmaker named Noah Dunn, Sheriff Dunn's grandson, visited the valley to shoot a documentary commemorating the centennial of the Holloway disappearance. He'd never met his grandmother. She died before he was born. But her journals had survived, filled with sketches of bridges, light, and recurring times circled in red ink. 4:42. He found the old riverbed empty, grass reclaiming what had been water. At the center, half buried in clay, his camera tripod struck something solid. He knelt, digging carefully, and uncovered the lantern. It flickered once, weak but alive. He aimed his camera at it, pressed record. The screen blinked. For a heartbeat, his lens caught not the valley but a corridor of glass beneath water. Endless reflections of people holding cameras, lights, hands reaching across decades. At the front stood a woman with dark hair and calm eyes. "Hello, Noah," Claire said. "We've been waiting." He didn't run. He simply nodded and lifted his camera. "What do you want me to do?" She smiled. "Remember us kindly." The light swelled, spilling upward like dawn. Weeks later, a ranger patrolling the valley found Noah's van parked near the ridge, doors unlocked, engine cold. On the passenger seat lay his camera. The memory card contained one final video, 30 seconds of river water under morning sun. At second 21, the surface rippled. 6 reflections appeared, then 7. At 29 seconds, a new shape joined them, holding the lantern. The timestamp at the end, 4:42:00. When the footage aired posthumously, the narration was composed from Claire's and Noah's voices, blended until indistinguishable. There's no such thing as disappearance. There's only who keeps the light and who pretends they never saw it. Every story reflected becomes its own lantern. When you look long enough, you'll see us looking back. The final shot held steady on the water. Gradually, faint silhouettes took form. 5 children, a woman, a sheriff, a boy, a filmmaker, each haloed in light. They lifted their hands as if shielding their eyes from the brilliance behind them. Then the screen flared white. The sound of a shutter clicked once, and the light stayed on.